In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys exactly how you can play the market next week and what to expect after a very exciting end to last week. So without further ado, let's get right into it. We are on the ES daily chart. And before I go into this next week's analysis, let's just recap what I said on my last bias video, which I created last Tuesday night. And one of the things I talked about was that I was pretty bearish because of this inverted fair value gap on the 4-hour chart. At the time, it looked somewhat like this. And I also wanted to make that video on a Tuesday because that Wednesday, the day after, was the day where the real move of the week was likely to start, because that's when all the news started, right? We had the GDP, Fed meeting, a lot of earnings came out and all that stuff. So I didn't make it on Sunday because I knew that Monday and Tuesday would probably be pretty boring. So last Tuesday night, I said I was kind of bearish because of this 4-hour IFVG on ES, and then we also had SMT between ES and NQ at that point. And if we look at the 4-hour chart, you'll see that. And let me just reset the view so you guys can see it clearly. Okay, so at this point, this is what the NQ chart looked like, and we had some obvious SMT between ES and NQ. So that was one of the reasons I was bearish. Now, I did say that this bullish 4-hour gap could end up supporting us if we did try to sell off hard, and the first reaction we got, that ended up being the case. As you can see, that was the day of the Fed meeting, and we had this fake sell-off pretty much after the Fed meeting when Jerome Powell started talking in a tone that made it seem like he didn't want to lower rates anytime soon. And we got a big move up also thanks to blowout earnings from Meta and Microsoft. So as you can see, we did get that fake out move down. We never inverted this 4-hour gap that held the first time we truly tested it. But then after that, we kind of lost it. And that's when I became very bearish, right? We had this death displacement candle, and then we also inverted this bearish 4-hour gap. And so at that point, I was kind of just like, all right, it looks like a pretty bearish structure right now. Let's see how the week closes. And boy, did the week close in an exciting fashion, right? So we had this massive sell-off on Friday, and that is going to take us right into the daily chart. The first thing I want to point out is that we have two IFVGs that were created on Friday, okay, which is pretty important, very bearish in my opinion, short term at least. So we had this daily bullish gap. We completely inverted it, knifed through it, and then we had this smaller one right here. Not as significant, but it was a fair value gap, and we inverted it. Now, the important thing about the daily chart is that we actually now have the opportunity to create an imbalance. And what I mean by that is, as long as Monday's candle doesn't wick or close all the way up like here, right, or at the top open of this candle, then we're likely going to have, at least to some capacity, a daily bearish fair value gap created after Monday's close, right? Because this is the Friday's candle. And like I said, unless Monday just brings a move all the way up here, and it doesn't even have to close up here, it would just, if it even wicks, that would obviously cancel the imbalance. But say we have a wick like this, okay, well, that'd be fine. We still have a bearish daily fair value gap. And I hope you guys kind of see what I mean, to where, like, on Monday, unless we get a move all the way back up to the top of this range from Friday, we will create a bearish daily imbalance. And it will be the first for a very long time. If you look at the movement, right, we've basically just been all up since April, but the last daily bearish imbalance that we created, just looking at this chart, was right here, okay? And it did get inverted, but it gave some pretty high resistance movement in the following days. And, you know, after that, it's all just basically been straight up. But it would be a change in character for the market without a doubt, because it would be the first bearish daily imbalance created in a long time. Now, the same exact thing goes for NQ. We'll get out of replay mode right here and show you guys what I'm talking about. So we also did invert a daily bullish gap on NQ. Now, NQ didn't have as obvious of a one as ES, right? This daily bullish gap right here was pretty obvious on ES, and then this one, like, was a little more discreet. The second one right here around that area, it was a little bigger. Let me just fix it. Okay, so that one was a little more discreet, but it still was a bullish daily gap. We inverted it. Now on NQ, there was only one really visible one, and it was right here, but we inverted that as well. And one of the reasons I think we're going to trade lower, just even based on the daily chart, is we've kind of got this collection of lows down here as well, right? So in this area, and then we have this bullish daily gap. We also have a very large notable bullish daily gap right here. So I do expect those two to be almost like a liquidity magnet if we do decide to trade downwards. And the other thing on ES, it's kind of the same story, right? We have this bullish daily gap right here, about 1% below where we currently are. And then another collection of them right in through this whole entire range. And that brings me to one of my main points last week. When I made the analysis video on Tuesday, kind of talking about my bias, I looked at the weekly chart. And actually, before we get to the weekly chart, I do want to point something else out before I forget. And we'll go to the volume so you guys can see what I mean. Okay. There's a saying in the market that a high volume pullback is not a pullback. It's more of a reversal. And why I bring that up is because you can see that as we continued to sell off, right, we started to gain momentum and gain volume. Every single day we had a lower low since Monday, right? Low, lower low, lower low, lower low, lower low. So from Monday to Friday, we had a lower low at the range every single day. So the max low of the range from Monday to Friday got increasingly low, okay? The volume literally increased every single day. Now, it was a high volume week in general because of all the news, but Friday, you know, we weren't as news heavy as some of the other days, yet the volume was astronomical compared to any of the other days. So as we gained downside momentum, we had increased volume. That is not typically a great sign. And so I usually don't use like indicators. I'm a price action trader, but obviously volume matters, right? If the sell-off is high conviction, if there's a lot of market participants in the sell-off, you can probably expect some more downside in the near future when you're seeing a volume chart like this. You're seeing inversions on the daily chart like this. And most importantly, and this is what takes me to the weekly chart, you're seeing something like this. Now, I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to kind of see what I mean with this. You can spot it probably already without me even saying it, right? And it's this massive bullish weekly fair value gap on ES. Now, let me delete the volume. Also note real quick that the weekly volume was pretty high, one of the highest weeks volume-wise this summer. But yeah, so we have this bullish weekly gap on ES. We also have it on NQ. So if we go to the weekly chart on NQ, we have a bullish weekly fair value gap. And I'll mark it out on there too. So I said last week that this is going to be likely a liquidity magnet. And if we were going to pull back to it, we would probably get a bounce in this general zone, but that it was probably going to be the spot to target for a downside move. We have not hit this yet on either index. And if you zoom in and kind of just do a measured move, it would be about 0.7% downside for ES to tap this, and probably a little more for NQ, just eye test wise. Yeah, it's going to be about 1.5% downside for NQ to tap into this bullish weekly imbalance. So yeah, obviously you guys know that this is internal liquidity, right? Market moves from internal to external liquidity, and sometimes to go higher, the market has to go lower first, right? And so that's why nobody should be panicking or, you know, throwing in the towel over this downside, right? Everyone's become spoiled because we've been moving up for months straight since the tariff tantrum, but right here, right, we had something like this where we didn't retrace into any weekly imbalance, but we had to pull back before we continued up. And now we're just doing it again. This is an uptrend, guys. It's never perfect. It's never all at once. So I do think that this is kind of what the market's doing right now. We're pulling back to shake out the late bulls, because one of my theses for a potential correction coming last week when I made my bias video and when I pointed out the bearish 4-hour look was that a lot of people are just starting to get long up here, right? And that's a horrible circle. Oh my God. Like, a lot of people are starting to get long this week, and I'm on Twitter a lot, and I do think that sometimes you can just inverse the widely accepted sentiment as like an indicator of your own. And everyone was hyper bullish up here, right? They get more bullish as price goes up, which is wrong. Okay. You want to be getting more careful as price goes up typically. And so that's kind of one of my theses that I use is like everyone's complacent right now. So a sell off to shake out the late bulls wouldn't shock me. And that's exactly what I think we're doing, because a lot of the late bulls will probably give up and capitulate, you know, if we move down a decent few percentage points more. And at that point, I think the market will gather the juice to make a new all-time high and to run back up. And like I said, markets move from internal to external liquidity and from external back to internal, right? So we were at a place of external liquidity. We had taken out a lot of highs. We had taken out all-time highs. Well, now we need to move back to this weekly bullish imbalance that we left in order to continue higher. That's my thesis. So when is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't exactly know, because we also have a lot of 4-hour imbalances that we need to retrace back into to go lower, right? We just created a lot of these this week, And as you can see, I'll mark out this bearish fair value gap right here. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if we have some sort of retracement move, right, to shake out the people who shorted the hole down here, and then we continue downwards and test that weekly bullish imbalance. Now, it also obviously could go the other way around. It's a very potential to happen, and the reason I say it's likely maybe that we just continue right down to the weekly bullish gap to test it is because of what I pointed out earlier, where we have inverted 2 daily bullish gaps on the ES daily chart. So the look right now is exceedingly bearish, and it wouldn't surprise me if we just sell off more, early next week. I'm not going to call it. I'm not going to give you days, right? But I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me more if we sold off aggressively early into next week to really test this bullish weekly imbalance. And I think it needs to happen, right? We're so close now. Like I said, we're about 1% downside away. So in this range, I will be looking for longs. Now, once again, that doesn't mean I'm blindly longing when we hit this. We could overshoot this gap, right? Just because we trade down to the bottom of it doesn't mean we'd close below it. Say we have a bloody Monday and Tuesday and we sell off another 2% and we're at the bottom of the gap. Well, maybe by the end of the week, we wick back up. Don't try to time it and just go long the second we tap this gap. Wait for a setup to occur within this bullish bias zone that you think you would want to be longing, okay? So never just say, oh, we got a weekly bullish gap here, I'm going to long the second we go into this. Because how many times have you seen a candle completely wick through a fair value gap and then come back up before it closes, right? Well, since it's a weekly chart we're looking at, what if you go long when we tap it on Monday and you spend 3-4 days underwater until we're finally back up? At that point, you're probably already liquidated, bro. So don't be that idiot who longs just because we've tapped this. But like I said, this is a strong draw on liquidity. Now that we're super close, I expect us to test it next week, right? That's just my expectation. And at that point, I'll be very much paying attention to how we react. There is a world where we invert this gap on high momentum and the selling continues. And at that point, I think we need to really question the validity of this rally. Because at that point, it's going to become a correction, I think. If we invert this bullish weekly gap, I think it's going to be a correction, which is like a 10% peak to trough. And the reason I say that is because we have this new week opening gap unfilled on futures. It is very rare to have a significant new week opening gap unfilled. This is like a 1% gap. This was from early May. I'm sure you guys remember. I forget exactly what news sparked it. It was obviously some tariff related thing. And yeah, if we invert this bullish gap on the weekly, I do think we're going to have to trade down and take all of this new week opening gap out and then continue higher again. But that might rely on some, more macro bad news or whatever. So we'll see. Everyone should pay attention, but just know this bullish weekly gap is like the line in the sand, okay? If we trade into it and get good setups, it's going to be an amazing long opportunity back up to the highs. If we invert it and get a good setup for a continuation short, we're probably going to go much lower. That's kind of just how these things work. And NQ, same exact story, right? We got to sell off about 1.5% on NQ to get down to this gap, about 0.75% on ES to get down to this gap. So this could happen in one day. We could test the gap and just see how we react from there. But like I said, since it is internal liquidity, it's a very strong draw. And given the bearish look on the daily chart, I do think that we will be testing this weekly imbalance sooner or later. So with that being said, I hope this video helped you guys. I hope that you got value out of it and you can mark all of these zones to potentially take some good trades off of next week. And like I said, it's not only longs, right? You could get long if you see a good setup in here, but you can probably already catch a continuation short, or not already, but you can probably also catch a continuation short. Because say that we just move right up early in the week and we actually don't test this gap. Say we move right up into one of these bearish 4-hour gaps that we left on Friday, right? And we create some type of daily bearish imbalance. Then you can easily play a short off of a retracement down to this bullish weekly gap and use this gap as your target, right? Because, and once again, this only will probably work if we have not retraced into the gap yet. So if we just move straight up on Monday, there will probably be opportunities to catch a continuation short. If we dip on Monday into this gap and then move right back up aggressively, then, more than likely it's just a bullish reaction and we might move back up to all-time highs depending on the environment of news, the market, all that stuff. So I don't project or predict like that. I react. I just look at what's likely going to be the draw on liquidity. And that's not really a prediction in a way. That's kind of a reaction because you're looking at where price has been, you're looking at where price logically needs to draw back to give a good move. But in this case, like I said, we have it right below us. A monster weekly bullish imbalance, and I think we're going to trade into it. So, yeah, like I said, I hope you guys all enjoyed the video and got some value out of it. If you're still watching this, you're probably serious about trading, and if that's the case, make sure to subscribe. And also, join my free Discord if you want to trade with me live several days a week and be part of my community. I'll be posting my weekly bias, daily bias, levels, and fair value gaps, all that stuff in the Discord several days a week to help you guys all learn with me and improve your trading. So, I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Peace.